The most painful thing that happens is we stop loving ourselves. We stop giving ourselves permission to love ourselves, and we're separated from our own love. And the real tragedy about being separated from our own love is that it's actually our own love that's going to heal us. How do we heal a broken relationship with ourselves? By loving ourselves. And the way that we begin to love ourselves is giving ourselves permission to love ourselves. Now the challenge is that there's barriers. We have barriers to giving ourselves that permission. We have all kinds of stories as to why we're unlovable. We have all kinds of stories as to why we're not allowed to love ourselves. Hello everybody. Welcome to the Permission to Love podcast. I'm Jerry and I'm really grateful that you're here. If you're new to me, I just want to share a little bit about what I do and why I do it. I help people in understanding how they can heal their relationship with themselves, because I went through a process as just a normal person of understanding how to heal my relationship with myself. I went through an 18-month period where my life basically imploded. I went through an open heart surgery, had a heart attack, then open heart surgery, then went through rehab, then through a divorce, and then through a second stay in rehab, and really began to understand that I had a relationship with myself, and that relationship was broken. And it was broken as a result of trauma and painful experiences that I had in my life. And so I simply now take what I've learned, to the journey that I've been on, and I offer it to other people in hopes that it will help them in healing their relationship with themselves. So today, I want to talk about the whole concept, this foundation, this principle of what I share with others about giving ourselves permission to love ourselves. This is part one of a two-part series about this topic. And so today we're going to talk about just some foundational stuff. And in the next episode, we'll get into more of the meat about how we can actually begin to give ourselves permission to love ourselves. Now, before we get into the rest of this episode, if you've not yet had a chance to subscribe or follow this podcast, just want to ask you to do that, because that's going to keep you updated on when new episodes come out. I also want to ask you a small favor, that if you haven't had a chance to rate it, review it, or leave a comment, please do so, because that's going to help continue to expand the reach of this podcast. And finally, if you know somebody who could really benefit from this content and about how they could heal their relationship with themselves, please share this episode with them or other episodes, because you never know the impact that it could make. Now, this being the month of October, I got a lot going on. It's a big month for me in three ways. Number one, I decided to come off the road. After about 2.5 years of living as a nomad, I finally decided to come off the road and make my home here in Colorado. Now, the second thing that's happening this month is I'm turning 54. And every time I have a birthday, I like to reflect where I've been, where I'm at, and where I'm hoping that I'll wind up going. And then the third thing that's happening, which is the biggest and the greatest of all of it, is I'm getting married this month. I'm getting married to an absolutely fantastic, precious soul, a love of my life. And I can't wait to start an amazing journey together as we learn how to heal our relationship with ourselves and bring that together in a beautiful relationship as we journey together as a couple. And as I'm reflecting on all of that, with everything that's going on, I'm filled with a lot of gratitude, because the reality is there's a pretty darn good chance that I wouldn't be here right now if I hadn't figured out how to give myself permission to love myself. And that's why I'm so passionate about this work. It's why I believe that it can be so transformational, because when we learn to love ourselves, absolutely everything changes. So let me start today with just the foundational philosophy, kind of the roots of all of this. And it's about what I talk about a lot, which is that you have a relationship, or we have a relationship with ourselves. Most of us don't realize that. I really didn't realize it, but when I did, it changed everything for me. And if we do realize that we have a relationship with ourselves, a lot of us aren't putting any work into that relationship. We're not evaluating it. We're not trying to understand how it's going. Is it growing? We think it's just going to take care of itself. The reality is, it's not just going to take care of itself. And the other reality is, it is the most important relationship that we have in our lives, because it's the one that's going to determine everything else in our life. All the other relationships, how we believe that life treats us. Is life fair or unfair? Are people good or are they bad? And when people treat us certain ways, we put it through the filter of our relationship with ourselves. If we judge ourselves and somebody comes to us and says, man, that was a great job, you did really good on that. If our first response is, man, they're just saying that, and nah, that's okay. I mean, I messed this up and I could have done better here or there. That's revealing that we have a broken relationship with ourselves. You see, that relationship filters everything. And that relationship got broken and often gets broken through things like trauma and other painful life experiences that sent us the message that we're unlovable, unworthy of love, and were very damaging to us. And that damage fragmented our relationship with ourselves, and as a result, wound up separating us from love. You see, we begin to push people away. We say to ourselves, people aren't trustworthy, and so we reject their love. And if we do receive their love, we do it with this real intrepidation because we think it's going to be yanked away, so we never really fully open ourselves up to love. And then the most painful thing that happens is we stop loving ourselves. We stop giving ourselves permission to love ourselves, and we're separated from our own love. And the real tragedy about being separated from our own love is that it's actually our own love that's going to heal us. How do we heal a broken relationship with ourselves? By loving ourselves. And the way that we begin to love ourselves is giving ourselves permission to love ourselves. Now, the challenge is that there's barriers. We have barriers to giving ourselves that permission. We have all kinds of stories as to why we're unlovable. We have all kinds of stories as to why we're not allowed to love ourselves. So let's dig into that a little bit. Let's talk about those barriers. And in order to do that, let's start at the beginning. Where did those barriers come from? Well, those barriers came from the experiences that we've had in life. We had painful experiences, such as trauma, painful experiences from the ways that other people treated us, sent the message to us that we're not lovable. I mean, how could we be lovable if those people would treat us that way? And so it stored that belief in our systems, in our body. Remember, trauma is not what happened to you, but what happens in you. And what happens in us is we begin to make these auto decisions about life, people, and ourselves. And so one of the decisions that we make is that we're unlovable and that we're not worthy of love because of that experience that happened, created a barrier. But I want you to take a moment and think about the logic of that. And I know that we're not making a logical decision in the moment. When trauma happens, we're making survival decisions, we're making survival responses. But now, in this moment, can you look at that and say to yourself, how could it be true that the way somebody else chose to treat me, the way that somebody else acted towards me, that I had no control over, no power over, how can something that is being done to me determine whether or not I'm lovable or I'm worthy of my own love? And even if you feel like you were somehow complicit in it, listen, you were not complicit. There was abuse, there was manipulation, there was power structures, there were all kinds of things that caused that trauma to happen. You weren't complicit. You were in survival mode. Big difference, okay? You were in survival mode. You weren't being complicit to the behavior. So maybe you could make the choice right now to drop that story, to let go of the story that because they did that to me, it means I'm unlovable. You had no choice in it. You had no control over it. It happened to you, and something happening to you doesn't determine whether or not you're lovable. It says everything about them, and it says nothing about you. The other experiences that create those barriers are the behaviors that we begin to display. You see, we had these things that happened to us. They gave us these core belief systems that we'll talk about here in just a second, which then caused us to reinforce those things. And so all of a sudden, we're now acting in ways that are giving ourselves even more of an excuse as to why we're not lovable, creating even more barriers because we're saying to ourselves, see, you're acting this way. That means you're not lovable. You're showing yourself and others that you're a person who's not worthy of love because you keep doing this and you keep doing that. Now, I want you just to consider for a moment that your behavior, I'm not making excuses, I want to be clear, but that your behavior is a result of belief systems that got developed because of the way that other people treated you, because of the trauma that you experienced, which developed a core belief system. I want you to try something really quick. Tell yourself right now in this moment that you're lovable. Tell yourself that you're worthy of love. Tell yourself that you're worthy of your own love. How does that feel? How does that feel in your body when you say that? Are you experiencing a lot of resistance? And if so, where? You see, if you're feeling resistance to those words, it means that you've got a core belief that's going against that. As long as you have that core belief, those words that are coming out of your mouth are misaligned with the core belief, and that's why it often feels so awkward in loving ourselves. Now, we're going to talk about it in the next episode, that even though it feels awkward, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it, and doing it is actually what's going to rewire that core belief that you're unlovable, but we'll get to that into another episode. But you can see that you have a core belief that resists the idea of you being lovable just by how you feel when you say it. Now, another way that you can see that you have a core belief that you're unlovable is the thoughts that you think. Those thoughts that you think about yourself, like the story that comes up when you mess up, or that narrative that says that you're unlovable, that you're stupid, that you deserve bad things and not good things. All of that's coming up from inside of you, from that well that you have inside of you of your core beliefs. So let's just go ahead and review that real quick. You have this barrier to giving yourself the permission to love yourself. It came from experiences, and those experiences created stories or narratives, and those narratives then became core beliefs that you have, and then those core beliefs then activate you to do more of the behaviors that then reinforce once again why you're not worthy of love, that prevents you from giving yourself permission to love yourself. So that is the most painful thing about a broken relationship with ourselves. That separation of being able to love ourselves, because that's what keeps us in that cycle. Because when we're separated from our own love, we begin to treat ourselves in just horrible ways. We treat ourselves in ways that we would never treat anybody else. I mean, think about it. The way that you talk to yourself, would you ever talk to anybody else that way? The belief that you are unlovable because of what you did. I mean, if you took those same behaviors and you saw somebody else do them, would you then think that they're totally unlovable and unworthy of love? You see, the challenge is we're so close to our behavior that we can't see the forest for the trees. And we're thinking that because we did it, we see it, we feel it, that it is the worst. And because it's the worst, we're the worst. That's one of the things that I love about the 12-step program. Now, I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I'm not involved in the 12-step program. It's a fantastic program, but it's just not something that I choose to engage with at this point in my journey. But one of the things that I just love about the 12 steps is number 4 and number 5. Step number 4 encourages us to take an inventory, a moral inventory it would be called. And it's really looking at all of the things that we're ashamed of, the ways that we've hurt others, the ways that we've hurt ourselves. And so we're making a very comprehensive list of those things in our life. And then that leads us to step 5, which is we share that with somebody. We share that list. Now that's super vulnerable. I mean, the vulnerable of all vulnerable, because that list, if it's comprehensive, it should create some real discomfort in us sharing that with other people. Now, here's the key part of it though, what it's designed to do. It's designed for you to be able to share it, get it out in the light, because as long as it's in darkness, it's creating shame. So sharing it, getting it into the light, allows it to begin to be met with empathy. And here's what people find often in the 12-step program. When they go to their sponsor and they share that list with them, they're expecting, right? Like, oh my God, you're a horrible person, or whatever the story is that they have in their head. But what they're met with is empathy. They're met with, yeah, me too. I've done a lot of the things that are on that list. Or, you know what, that's all you got? My list is like so much worse than that. And not that we're into comparative, worseness, but the reality is what it's doing is it's allowing a clear vision to come to what we're judging ourselves so much for. Because you're close to the behavior, you think that it's the worst. But as you begin to share it and you begin to be met with empathy and a me too and a, you know what, I got a lot worse that has been in my story than that, all of a sudden you're able to see that that list, it doesn't make you unlovable. That list makes you human. That list does not have the power to rob you of you giving yourself permission to love yourself. You see, the thing that I didn't share about my moment in rehab where I said, I'm worthy of my own love, that came on the last day. But what came before that was 30 days of me being with therapists and with group sessions, of me being vulnerable, of me sharing and being met with empathy. It was peeling the layers off little by little. I had been taking the risk in micro risks to say, hey, this is my experience. This is what I've done. This is what's happened. Here's where I'm at. And all of it was being met with, yeah, me too. And wow, you know what? Here's my story. And then I was also being met with the science, the research behind why a person would be displaying that behavior, having experienced what I had experienced. So it was really de-shaming all of it. It was de-shaming all of the reasons that I was thinking that I was unworthy of love. And I want to take a moment right now and help do that for you. Whatever your story is, whatever your list is, whatever your reasons are, I guarantee you I can relate to it. I guarantee you I would be able to sit with you, hear that story, and meet you with empathy. I know you immediately think, no, you wouldn't because I did this. Listen, whatever it is, I've heard worse from somebody else. Whatever it is, you are still lovable. Whatever it is, I guarantee you I could sit with you and meet that list and meet you with empathy and say, yeah, me too. And you know what? I've done some things on that list, and I've done some things that aren't on that list that might even be worse than what's on that list. So I want you to be able to understand that the barriers that you have, the things that you're telling yourself as to why you're unlovable, aren't true. And I hope you can realize that the exact thing that you're resisting, your own love, giving yourself permission to love yourself, is absolutely the thing that is going to heal you. It's going to be the thing that wipes out the list. It's going to be the thing that removes all the barriers that you have to it. See, it's kind of counterintuitive, right? We think, well, when I feel worthy of love, I'll start to love myself. No. What we do is we begin to love ourselves in spite of whether or not we feel worthy of it. And then that begins to change us, that begins to heal us, and we begin to find that we are lovable. And that permission to love yourself can start today. You can just sit and take a moment and say the words to yourself, I am worthy of my own love. It's why I end every episode with those words. I am worthy of my own love, because it is a powerful way to give yourself permission to love yourself and to start on a healing journey. Well, I know this might be a frustrating point for me to end this episode, but we're going to have to end for today, and then we'll pick up in the next episode about some practical things that you can do to reinforce that permission, and then what happens once you give yourself permission to love yourself and what that journey might look like. Now, I do want to remind you that if you are having challenges and you can't seem to get past some of those barriers, you don't have to journey alone. If you do need some help, you do need some support, it's actually what I specialize in helping people overcome shame and moving towards loving themselves. You can find more information on my website at jerryhenderson.org/coaching. You can reach out to me on Instagram at Jerry A. Henderson, or you can shoot me an email at jerry@jerryhenderson.org. Thank you so much for taking the time to invest in yourself and listen to this episode. And until next time, remember, you are absolutely worthy of your own love.